Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm going to teach you how to make this cutesy t-shirt from basically nothing. Like all you need is paper and some fabric. Um, I'm going off this Beyonce shirt. It's one of my favorites. Love you, Beyonce. Um, and the pattern making paper I'm using has numbers and stuff on it, but you can use any paper that you can find. It obviously has to be as big as the t-shirt. Um, the front and back neckline are different on every t-shirt usually. And so y- this pattern will use just one pattern for the front and back. So you'll have to cut the necklines separately. You'll see in a second what I mean, but I'm folding the shirt in half so that I can save paper. Make sure that's really in half. You want to match all the hem and the shoulder seams so that your pattern is nice and even. Pick your favorite t-shirt. This one's a size large so that it can fit over my head and everything. If you do something that's really small, you might have to consider the stretchiness of the fabric and making the neckline a little bit bigger. You don't necessarily need a sewing machine to sew this pattern up once it's cut from fabric. And I'll show you how to do that with hand stitching. But let's get started on the pattern, shall we? So I use a see-through ruler, 18-inch see-through ruler, but you can really use any type of ruler that you can find. I'm making a straight line for the fold line that's center front and center back, and then lining up where I folded the shirt exactly in half. I didn't make the line long enough, so I had to make it a little bit longer. You can also just use the edge of your paper if it's a straight line. I like to leave a little bit extra so that when I'm cutting, it's not as difficult. So I'm marking where the center front and center back necklines are, as well as the hem. Basically just putting like X's at all the key endpoints under the arm. As you can see, there's a seam on most t-shirts where the armhole is. And that between the underarm and the shoulder edge, there's an armhole shape that is not necessarily a straight line. It's kind of curved. So if you draw a straight line, you might need to bring it in slightly. If it's easier for you to draw a straight line and then bring it in. Here I try to bring it in by just 1/4 of an inch, but I realize I need to bring it in actually 1/2 of an inch. So I've been doing pattern making for about what, like almost 20 years now. I used to work in high fashion, and so I can kind of just look and see what the best shape is. I'm labeling that the armhole so that when the pattern is done, you can see exactly what you're looking at. It helps you to mark um, where things are and what they are called. That's probably the best way to go so that you don't get confused as you're sewing. Again, I've been doing this for a really, really long time. I used to be a professor of fashion design, and I really love teaching people how to make their own clothes. It's really important that we can all be able to do this kind of stuff because there's a lot of textile waste. And if you can use textile waste to make your own clothes, you're saving the environment, kind of. So, next thing that I do in this for this pattern is the hem. I have a little bit of a curve because I want the 90-degree angle at where the side seam meets the hem. I'm going back to the armhole and I'm looking at it and reshaping it. I'm thinking that I want to, well, first I'm labeling that it needs to be 90 degrees. That's something I already mentioned. I label the front and back necklines so that I don't get confused. And then I am looking at this and I'm thinking I want it to come out a little bit further so that I have a little more of a 90-degree angle. That way when I'm sewing, I don't end up with like a V shape under my arm and it's easier to sew in the sleeve. All right. So the next thing is the sleeve. I go back to my shirt and I don't need to have it in half anymore. I am going to do this pattern on the fold as well, um, so that I don't have to use as much paper. And because it looks the same on the front and the back, you can save time and paper, which is always important. We love planet Earth. So just like the front and back body piece, I'm starting with my straight line, which is my fold line, and I'm marking all the important spots um, with X's. And just like the armhole, this sleeve cap isn't a straight line, it's a little bit curved. I'm eyeballing it, but it's probably about a half inch away from the straight line, just like the armhole was. If you do it as a straight line, it's gonna kind of dig into your shoulder, front shoulder and back shoulder. Pattern making is super fun because it's like puzzles that go around your body. It's not that easy to do and think about necessarily because it's your body our bodies are not like 2 by 4s. Our bodies have lots of curves, and so that's why our clothing patterns have lots of curves too. Here I'm labeling my pattern just so I don't get confused. It's important to do, especially if you're brand new to this type of thing. It really helps you keep in mind what the pieces are and what you're doing. Next time adding seam allowance, there has to be distance between where you sew the seam and where the fabric gets cut. I'm using my see-through ruler and doing a half-inch seam allowance. I can kind of eyeball half an inch at this point in my life after doing this for so long. Um, but you can use any type of ruler. And even if you wanted to do a bigger seam allowance, like here on the hem, I'm doing 1 inch because I'm pretty tall. I want to have a little bit of extra length to see what's going on. Same with at the armhole. Here, I am doing a half inch on the inseam of the sleeve and on the sleeve cap. And I'm going to label my sleeve. You need two sleeves, um, and you need two of the body pieces, but one with the front neckline and one with the back neckline. So here I'm cutting my pieces out. I think it's kind of fun to watch. These are tailoring shears. You can get them on Amazon for not that expensive, and they're honestly so great. You can cut paper and fabric. You don't need to use two different pairs of scissors. So I'm cutting on my seam allowance, and I realized I didn't add a seam allowance to the neckline. That seam allowance can be a little bit smaller, like 3/8 of an inch or even a 1/4 inch. I am not going to cut away from the pattern for my front neckline yet, but I am going to mark the seam allowance so that when I lay my piece over top of the pattern, I have my cut line. I leave some extra at the center front so that when I put the pattern on the fabric, I'm pretty sure that the center front cut line is on the fold. If you cut on that fold line, you can't really see what the fold line is, and that means you could cut wrong. Next, I'm cutting out the sleeve. Um, Again, cutting a little bit away from my cut on fold line so I can see what it is. And then here I realize I'm cutting away extra paper. Here I realize that I forgot to make sure that my hem seam allowance at the bottom there was mirroring what's above the fold line. So I didn't do a great job at mirroring, but it's supposed to be um I could tape a piece of paper in there. I'll probably just cut my fabric and it probably won't even make that much of a difference. But if you kept it as a straight line that goes down, then if you tried to roll the hem, you might have a hard time because that distance is smaller than what the distance above the hem is. Hopefully that makes sense. Now I'm going to make sure that my sleeve armhole and the body armhole are the same length. This is called walking your pattern to make sure that the pieces will fit together. Again, it's like a puzzle, like you want things to fit together exactly. So I put this at the bottom and I notice that I need an extra little bit of length on my sleeve, so I can actually just move that fold line out a little bit so that this line matches, so that that armhole line matches. I'm gonna get rid of my old cut on fold line and make sure that it's on the front of my pattern, the new cut on fold line, so that my pieces match together perfectly and it'll be nice and easy to sew. Relabeling stuff, I could use whiteout. If you use pencil, you can erase your mistakes a lot easier. I love using number 2 pencils. Let's bring back number 2 pencils as a society, I believe. So next I'm gonna cut my fabric. This fabric I got legit at Walmart. They have remnants of fabric, like rolls of remnants that are like $3 each. I'm not sure if those remnants come from like other fabric mills or what happens there, but they have some good choices. Um, I have a lot of fabric that people have just given me, and you could even use like an old bed sheet. It's this kind of shirt you can do out of a lot of different things, especially if the neckline, you pick a shirt where the neckline is big enough to fit over your head, whether the fabric is stretchy or not. The fabrics I'm using here are pretty stretchy. Horrible job at keeping what I'm doing in frame, by the way, so sorry about that. If you need to use pins or, like, fabric weights, like, go for it. I, again, have been doing this for so long that I don't really need to use those things. I just fold my pattern down. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect if you're sewing it yourself for yourself because you're the only one who's gonna know what the mistakes are. So I've got 2 sleeves here. If you could if I can get them in the frame. They were both cut on fold, and so now I have 2 full sleeve pieces, and they're pink and cute. We're gonna put those over there, and we're gonna focus on the body fabric. And now I'm gonna cut the body out of this cutesy pink mesh that I got also in the remnant section at Walmart. Obviously, Walmart isn't the best place to shop, and you can, yeah, use any sort of old fabric you can find. You could use a tablecloth or a bed sheet or anything. Um, there's lots of places to buy recycled fabrics, like the thrift store, or if you even like cut up some old pieces and sew them as patchwork, you can really do a lot of recycling of fabric. So I'm lining it up on the fold. Again, you can see why oh, hitting the gritty. Because I know it's gonna be cute. So next thing I'm doing is getting in frame, apparently, my head, but yeah, cutting out the piece. Sorry for my horrible video skills. This is my first YouTube video, and I'm only gonna get better, y'all. Cutting the hem, cutting around all the edges. If you need pins, use pins. Um, it's kind of hard to make sure that the cut on fold stays on fold sometimes if you're not using pins. Again, I've been doing this for so long that I can kind of just like make sure that it's okay. And she got it. There we go. So now I'm going to take one of my pieces off, and that will be my back piece. Now I need to lay this piece, I'm gonna actually just lay it on top and cut the neckline away for that front neckline so that I don't cut my pattern at all. You could use like a pencil to mark or like, I don't know, anything really, but if you can just make sure that the shoulders go to the same area, like the same shape, then you're all good. Perfect, huh? Perfect. So now I'm going to teach you, or at least just show you how to do some sewing without a sewing machine if you don't have one. Basically, if you were to do like in out kind of like a hand stitch, it would come apart, but here you see that I kind of loop back to where the last stitch was started and then I go forward a little bit. This is called a chain stitch. If you're hand stitching, you have to make sure to do something like this in order to have your stitch stay and not have it be like kind of half coming apart. If you have a sewing machine, that's even better. It's sewing machines, you can find them at the thrift store usually sometimes, or if you buy one that's like pretty cheap, like $100, that would work for this. If you were like doing production level sewing on this shirt, then you'd want to use a serger and something that's very specific for knit wear. But again, if you're making this for yourself and you are just trying to experiment and have some fun and reduce textile waste, then there's really no problem in doing a straight stitch. So now I did the other shoulder with that same method, and you can see that I have my neckline here. Here's my neckline, and you want to make sure before anything else that this fits over your head before you go any further. Next, you want to grab your sleeve and just double check that it fits along that line where the armhole is. You do have to do a little tiny bit of like rotating it. If you're hand stitching it, you might want to start at um where the shoulder seam is and make sure that it fits. And at this point, I think I decide that I'm going to use my sewing machine because I have one and it's way faster. But this is what it would look like. That's what it'll look like. Um, First, you do the armhole, and then you're going to do a long stitch together. You're going to fold. That's me trying to tell you that you're going to fold it up together and do a long stitch on the side seam and the sleeve inseam. So here I am at my sewing machine. I have an industrial sewing machine because I break other sewing machines. This Juki DDL 8700 is about like $800 and I put it together myself. And if you're somebody who like breaks machines and you have the space for an industrial machine, it's honestly like so much better than a home machine. For me now, home machines are like toys because I can't even, yeah, it's definitely worth the investment if you're doing a lot of sewing. Here I'm just showing that, okay, I'm going to do a notch at where the fold line was on our pattern and match that up to the shoulder seam. Like I said, it's sometimes easier to do that and start from the important point because if you start at one end and go to the other end, the fabric might stretch. So maybe starting at the shoulder and going down the front armhole and then cutting the thread and going starting at the shoulder seam again and going down the back armhole. that could be the best way to make sure that your sleeves are even. Alrighty, so I did both sleeves, and then, like I said, you fold the shirt kind of, you're basically gonna turn the shirt inside out and sew down the sleeve um, inseam and the side seam as well. I guess I'm checking something there. But you go just down the sleeve and then over the armhole and down all the way down the side seam. I don't really use pins when I sew because, yeah, I've been doing it for so long. I just line up the fabric and kind of make sure that it's going to go through it nicely. Always clip your threads. I never take my own advice, by the way. You could see at the beginning of this video that the threads were still on there. So, yes. And now I did both sides. So now I have a shirt. Let's go, right? Easy enough. Easy enough to do by oneself. And very cute. Here I am again wearing it. The front and back neckline are different. I made sure when I put it on that I put the back neckline in the back. Let me know what videos you guys want. I have pants coming up next, how to make your own pants. This top is available on drfashion.net if you want to buy it. And thanks for watching. Bye. See you next time.